This is the Conrad Alert. Civil defense information will be broadcast at 6:40.
West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Y2K, how can we prepare?
Stop a few of their machines and radios. Throw them into darkness for a few hours.
We are fighting for our lives. My family must survive.
For 5 years, 1,000 gallons of gas, air filtration, water filtration.
Coming at you from the frozen tundra that is East Central Alberta, Canada, streaming live on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Rumble, and Odyssey. Welcome back to the workshop where we create community, find freedom, promote preparedness, and share success. I am Toolman Tim. Today is June the 5th, 2024, and this is episode 453 of Workshop Radio. How is everyone out there this evening? We're going to forego all the niceties and we're going to jump right in because I have a good friend of both myself and of the workshop coming in very long distance this evening. We had to get the satellites up and running early just to make sure that the signal would come through from Albania. So with that, let's bring on Jake. Just give me a moment here. Hey, Jake, how are you, brother? Whoops, I got you muted. Sorry. There we go. Let's try that again. How are you, Jake?
Good. How are you?
Good. I had to look back. This is your third appearance on Workshop Radio. You're in pretty elite company at this point.
I know. I'm pretty impressed to be on here for a third time, but I do enjoy coming over here and having good conversations with you. So
I always, it's I was thinking it'd been just a year since you and I met. I guess, I mean, we've talked for many years online, but just a year ago right now where we finally get to meet up and sit down and have a little bourbon together. Absolutely.
Yeah. And they're Memorial Day weekend there in Washington. So
yeah. And they just had the Washington event was just, I think, last weekend. And there was no way I was going to talk Becky into going to another one after I've been away for a bit. So you've had some, why don't you, it's been a little while since you come on and there's always new listeners, but why don't you give us kind of the elevator pitch, who Jake is and where you've come from? And
Oh, absolutely. So, a lot of big changes in my life. So here at the end of 2023, right in December, I retired from the U.S. Army after 21 years. While I was in the Army, I served in multiple different roles, but primarily aviation, and my specialty was in the Black Hawk helicopter. And so when I retired, I was going to try to kind of stay away from that world. And things kind of just lead you right back into it. And now I'm working basically in a kind of a similar role, but assisting the Albanian Air Force. They purchased a few Black Hawks from the U.S. military or from the U.S. government because through a program called Foreign Military Sales, and they have a program, and we're assisting them basically set up their program and learn how to maintain them and safely fly them and all that good stuff. So it's opportunities. It presented itself to be able to spend a little time in Europe and while making a paycheck. So hey, why not?
Were those Black Hawks upkept a little bit better than the Sea Kings?
I mean, they did buy the kind of the oldest, some pretty old ones. So especially in the helicopter world. So, and they've had a lot of work on them recently, and they'll have their work cut out for them to keep them, running.
So are you, and I don't know how much you can talk, you can cut me off at any point, but so are you like an independent contractor or like a private contractor working with them?
Yeah, I work for a private company that is fulfilling a U.S. Government contract. So they do these all over the world for different types of programs, basically with anybody that's those that are not aware, Albania is a NATO, is a part of NATO and has been for a long time. And so through a lot of these programs, they'll be like, hey, we want to purchase, U.S. military type equipment or U.S. military type equipment. And they'll present packages to them like, hey, you can have a assistance team basically come out and train you on how to operate and maintain and use that equipment, and, so that they kind of get all on the right, because I'm sure in your line of work over the years, obviously, if you don't maintain things, they become
Absolutely.
really expensive boat anchors. So,
I mean, that's just the nature of the world in general. Things tend toward disorder and decay, and if they're not upkept, just look at a house that isn't lived in for even a short period of time, it can go haywire.
Yeah, and culturally, depending on, because like I said, this is all around the world. These things happen. It's not just NATO, but partners and stuff like that, U.S. partners. Sometimes they don't have the same type of programs as we have, and they, so these teams help them kind of realize the importance of things like maintenance and taking care of things, because if you don't, then like I said, it becomes a really expensive boat anchor. So,
look at the AK, for instance. It was designed to never be taken care of, right?
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
there's the mindset. I get it. Yeah. So, a couple more questions on this, and just because I wanted to pick your brain a little bit. How was the transition from military life to civilian life?
Well, so it kind of, the way they have it set up, especially when you're retiring, you tend to build up a lot of leave, or what we call leave, or like PTO time, as a lot of people call it. And so you kind of step away, and you're doing a lot of stuff that you're trying to get set up to transition out of the military. And so I was still getting a paycheck for quite a while, but really wasn't, I was not going to work. I was on leave, or on off. So so during that period of time, it was a little, honestly, it was stressful. Kind of some of the possibilities I thought in some of the other places where I applied. I thought, hey, I went through on one interview process and went through like 3 levels, and I was like, oh man, all my feedback was great, and the person, the director of the department and stuff like that, was like, oh yeah, we want you really bad, and so forth. Well, you learn really quick that, guess what? It's a board of people, and he only has 1 vote. So,
oh, sure.
So you get this kind of like a lot of highs and lows, and I wasn't. I wasn't quite prepared for that. At first it was kind of like disheartening a little. I was like, dang, man. And I guess maybe that's why all of a sudden, when an old friend, because that's really how jobs work, is networking, right? Sure. Hit me up. He's like, hey, you interested in coming to Europe? And I'm like, maybe. So what's the job entail?
So, okay, one more question on this, I guess. I suck at European geography. So,
yeah,
where is Albania in kind of reference to all the interesting things that have been going on in Europe as of late?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So, it's and I'll say this incorrectly. It's a Balkan country, not Balkan, which is just north of Greece.
Okay.
And so right on the Adriatic Sea, and then like the southern part is on the Ionian Sea, I think is how it's pronounced. And then, basically right across the sea is Italy. You can, you can hop on a flight here and be in Italy in like 35 minutes, and it's less than $100 for a round trip ticket.
Oh, wow.
So that's one thing that, if maybe we'll talk later, but flights in Europe are so much cheaper than they are in the US, like just for the short, like hops around, yeah, pretty impressive actually how cheap they are. But yeah, so, and then the north of this is Croatia and Montenegro, or Montenegro, then Croatia. And then you've got Kosovo. Really the only actor in the area that's, goes back to the 90s, when the conflict between Serbia and Kosovo, and really, because like Kosovo is considered, them and the Albanians are basically like cousins or whatever. They consider
Okay.
themselves like really close, even though they're separate countries. Uh, Language is very similar, just like a different dialect, but they pretty much everybody in the region doesn't like the Serbians, at least the ones I've talked to. So
no, not a huge concern with the whole Ukrainian thing. I mean,
no,
I know
no,
you're a fair bit away at that.
we're far enough away from there to, I mean, per
Yeah,
se. Yeah, I
sure.
mean, I definitely have, made some contingency plans. Okay, how do I get out of here? I mean, obviously the quickest one is hop over to Italy and then go from there. So, but
Sure.
because you can do a ferry or a plane flight over there. So,
Okay. No, just curious.
yeah.
When Becky was going to Europe, it was just before that, but there was other unrest at the time. And yeah, something that goes through your mind, right? I mean, it can just as easily happen here, I suppose, but it is what it is.
Well, yeah, and things are definitely seem tense right now, with some of the other NATO nations talking about, getting involved, and then of course Russia, responding with saying, "Hey, they get involved. That's a red line." We've heard a lot of red lines, but
I'm going to
never
mark
know
this
which
line
one
in the
will.
sand. And,
Yeah,
yep.
which one will actually trigger something, more severe. So,
Well, let's hope that we don't have to see it. That's all we can say, right?
that would be great.
So of course, I mean, other than being a family dude and ex-military, I guess former forces or whatever you
Yeah.
would say at this point. Also, very much into Coleman gear, Coleman lanterns, and
absolutely.
Coleman stoves and stuff. Which, we got a bit of a mutual interest at this point. But one of your big things has been comms. You did a great series. Oh, man, that's probably a couple of years or a year ago now on putting together a comms plan. Was it?
Yeah, I did. I did one on that, but kind of basically because obviously, I consider myself a prepper and have been in the preparedness space for a long time. And I've always had I grew up around CB radios because my dad always had them in all of his vehicles. And, always had a small little fascination with, two-way communications, especially radios. And, obviously, grew up without cell phones. So, you can relate, it's not before the cell phone world. A lot of people can't imagine that world, I guess, but, having the ability to just grab a radio and talk to somebody, wirelessly, was kind of cool. So, but I realized early on that some of the, other than fact, yes, I understand that no matter what, comms will never be sexy to most people, but they'd rather spend their money on the cool stuff, the guns and whatnot, but MBGs and body armor and everything else in between. But the ability to communicate, is beat into you in the military. I mean, a commander on a battlefield, if he can't communicate, he's ineffective. So I've always tried to figure out a way to create content on that, in that spectrum, as to kind of break down some of the barriers that I feel like impede some people from getting into any sort of emergency communication. Because in my opinion, if you only have one layer, just like everything else, you're if it's just this cell phone, then that's a pretty bad communications plan. So,
sometimes people laugh at the the military acronyms, and like PACE, for instance, right? And that, I don't know, maybe the older I get, but that just seems to apply to so many things.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the military, we'll even use it for other stuff other than just communications, because it just becomes a tool you use to just like, okay, because contingency planning is a big part of any, military planning. If you're planning any sort of mission, whether it's a training exercise or a real world situation, you're building in contingencies for the what ifs, which, someone like myself, of course, loves what ifs, but, probably too much sometimes, but it's a great tool to kind of keep you dialed in, I guess, having those things that keep you from going too far off in the what ifs, I guess. So
what are you seeing in the emergency comm space right now that's kind of interesting, and what's got your fancy going right at the moment?
Well, but obviously, I spend, probably as much time on YouTube consuming content as I do creating content, or obviously more probably consuming than. I don't really watch a whole lot of TV anymore. A lot of times I just turn YouTube on my TV, but I've seen a very dramatic probably about the last 12 months increase in interest in emergency communications, which is, makes someone like myself really happy to see, because I'm like, wow, people are finally getting it, and I kind of like it as because it, like someone that's a prepper or survivalist or whatever they want to call themselves, if we use a term in the military, a whole soldier concept, right? It's a circle, and if there's a piece missing, right? If you don't have that full circle complete, and communications is one of those things, then, maybe your plans that you think, how well prepared you are a little lackluster if you don't have something there to fulfill that communications slice of that whole prepper concept. But yeah, so it is exciting. And then the technology, the market's responding. I think that's another area that I've really noticed is, the manufacturers are realizing that there's a new demand, and they're trying to fill it. And I'll just as a disclaimer, there's also a lot of people out there, just like any other sector of the preparedness space, that are also trying to take advantage of the doom and gloom, and not selling you something that's what it really says it is.
So what kind of stuff are you? Well, actually, let's back up just a hair. What do you think is driving this renewed interest in comms?
I don't know if it's so. There's some key channels that I've watched for many years that are on the communication side, mostly the ham side. But the reason why I kind of filtered out some of the ham radio YouTube channels is some are only ham and won't talk about anything else because they're purists, and that's not me, and I am a ham radio operator, but they're willing to talk about other technologies that are other radios that aren't, don't require FCC license to operate. And where I think Meshtastic has helped kind of break through that category a little bit. They kind of fall in if there's people over here from my Telegram group, don't get offended, but I kind of consider Meshtastic like kind of like the Baofings of the radio world. Because they're very affordable. So it gets people in the door. And they're like, okay, here is some new technology I can use that's not really expensive. Has a little higher, well, probably about the same learning curve as it would be to use a two-way radio. But yeah, I've seen some pretty high-profile channels. I mean, what Evan's doing, like he did when he went out to Mike Glover, he's a retired SF guy, and Mike's channel, he has a bunch of different stuff. He has a podcast and stuff, kind of touches really in the veteran community, especially in the special operations side of the veteran community. And those guys understand the value in communications, and also they like the technology side. Or a lot of times they do, not everyone, I'm stereotyping, but yeah. So I think that kind of really, because obviously there's a lot of people within the preparedness space that when they see, some guy, they're like, oh, this guy used to be, Green Beret and he thinks comms are cool, so maybe I should like think comms are cool too. I don't know, that happens, it's like, oh, here's my idol, or whatever, or, and he says comms are cool. So, hey, maybe I need to get more than that bubble wrap radio I got from Walmart 5 years ago. It's been sitting in a drawer ever since, so.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, didn't you turn me on to Mike? Were you the one that recommended Be Prepared?
Yeah, his book, Prepared.
Or Prepared, yes.
Yeah, it is Prepared, right? Yeah.
Yeah. He's a cool dude. I follow him on Instagram now too.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see guys like that talking about it.
Yeah. Like I said, when he even talks about, I think, Evan's kits, he's like, it's great to have someone like him, out there, because he understands the value of communications, but he also is like, I'm not a communications nerd, and it's nice to have somebody that'll like build this kit and just, here you go,
So talk a bit about Meshtastic, because you came on last time and we did a pretty deep dive into mesh networking, but obviously it's something you're still pretty hot about, which is good.
Yeah,
but
absolutely. I've expanded out a little too. And one of the things I'll first talk a little bit about Meshtastic and then explain just mesh communications a little bit, because they tend to get muddied because people don't quite understand the difference, or they've only heard of Meshtastic. So if someone explains something else, they're like, oh, you mean Meshtastic? Well, kind of. But so Meshtastic is really I tried to kind of drive the train to call it LoRa radio, because really what it is LoRa radio. What LoRa stands for is long range. It's a technology that was developed actually in France, and then a company called Simtech bought them out in the US. And really they use what's called the ISM band, which is the industrial, scientific, and medical bands. That it's a low power band that doesn't require license to utilize, and is recognized around the world. Depending on where you're at, there's different frequencies that you can use. Like in the US or North America, it's 915 megahertz. And there's a power restriction, I believe. Don't quote me on this. I think it's 1 watt is the power limit. So the Meshtastic devices, like this little T-Echo right here, they operate like millivolts. So, they're or milliwatts, sorry. And so very low power, but impressive range for that low of power. And then they interface using the application called Meshtastic with your phone. So you have an app on your phone, you Bluetooth connect to the radio, and then you SMS message. You can see location of if the device, because not all devices have a GPS in them, but you can use a GPS from your phone if it's connected to a phone to basically broadcast your position. There's a lot of things you can do with them as far as like encryption and setting up your own private channels. There's a lot of tweaking you can do to utilize them a little better. But they are like, it's an open source project, Meshtastic is, and there's constant firmware updates, and you'll get one bug that's everything's working with it, because there's a bunch of different types of devices that are made by different manufacturers and stuff. And all of a sudden, like a new update will come out, and then your device has problems. So it does have some limitations and can frustrate somebody maybe that's not, very technical. Somebody that doesn't like to, gets frustrated with updates on their computer or changing the settings on their computer may not really like something like this, because it does require sometimes to do a little reading and a little digging, maybe join some online groups and ask some questions and learn from other people or watch videos, that type of thing, to get really efficient at it. But it's getting better, and there's getting more and more like this T-Echo. And I constantly talk about this one because it was basically the only one for a while that was an off the shelf kind of ready to go. versus now there's, like I was talking about, the market's kind of recognizing the demand, and Brack Wireless, which was one of the other companies, is producing one now that's going to be ready to go. You're going to pay more because you don't have to do any of the work yourself, put it together, buy batteries, do nothing. It's ready to go. So, yeah. And then, you have any questions before I move on to like what mesh radio is, or?
Yeah. So the new one is going to be turnkey then. Hey, so like, for somebody who doesn't want to say assemble their own Raspberry Pi or, boot to Linux without knowing what they're, I'm not saying that, but that's kind of, kind of the same type of stretch. So this new one is going to be like, hey, I'd like to throw a little extra money at it, but the learning curve is going to be quite a bit narrower.
Yeah, and there has been people that are individuals that have been building them, because the big thing is a lot of them come without a case, and so if you don't have a 3D printer, now you're looking for somebody to buy a case from, or you're buying a 3D printer. Now, I did buy a 3D printer, not just to build cases, because it was an excuse to buy one. I'd already wanted to buy one. So, and it's a fun hobby. I wish I had it here with me in Albania, but getting stuff over here is a little difficult. So, but like this one comes in an ASB or ABS, case already, pre-mold case. The one from Rack is coming from it's a 3D printing case, but it's, they're collaborating with a few people and selling it through a company called Rockland, and they're like the main U.S. distributor or North America distributor for mesh. They do a lot of other stuff, but mesh testing devices is kind of the been their bread and butter for a while now because it's the popularity, and they're constantly sold out, which shows you the demand. And like, it's like I said, it's blown up in the last, because I started my first video over 2 years ago. And the reason I did it is because there wasn't really, as I learned about them, I was like, this is really cool, but there's not a lot of information about these on YouTube. So I was like, well, I'm learning about them. Why not share what I'm learning here on YouTube? And they've been really popular videos. But now you go on YouTube and you type it in, like you're going to find tons of content creators that are creating content about mesh-tastic devices.
So you're probably going to get into it, but it's a local form of comms, right? Within reason.
Yeah, absolutely. You're looking at, like, I don't want to overstate because some people are going to be like, wait, but, and I'll get people to tell me that, like, I can't even get a block. And I'm like, okay, what are you doing? But, you can reasonably expect, depending on where you're at, if you're in dense urban area, large, concrete buildings all around you, less than a mile. But in a more suburban type area, you could look between 1 to 3 miles without having pre-positioned devices, nodes, because it does work. And that's what mesh, the whole mesh world comes from, is that they're able to receive a message like this one. If I'm 3 miles from my house, but normally say I couldn't reach back to the house, but there happens to be a node in between me and my house, well, that's going to relay that message back to, and it doesn't even have to be on, the cool part is it doesn't even have to be, well, there's a downside to it too, but it doesn't even have to be on because you can have your own channels to where other people can't hear what you're saying. Yep. There's a default channel they're all set to when you get them, and a lot of people use those because they're trying to find other users in their local area. And so if they change the channel, then they may not find users in their local area. So if they dial in and they change the channel, then they're not going to, which if they want privacy, then 100%, right? That if you want to change your channels and change your settings, there's a lot of settings. I have a video on that. I basically change your privacy settings because A lot of people the default, it'd be like, it's kind of like the same thing. If you buy a router from your internet provider and you leave it as the default password, well, there's people that know what those default passwords are, or they can guess them, and you might regret that.
So do they work a bit like an Apple AirTag, where they'll transmit in the background no matter what device is around, even if they're on a different channel, say?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And where that can be a problem is some areas are getting so saturated with them now that they'll get to their limit. So there is some restrictions. For one, the LoRa has very limited bandwidth, so that's why it's really text message only, a little bit of telemetry data.
Sure.
So like you can have devices that have temperature sensors, humidity sensors, air quality sensors, and stuff like that, and you can see the data it'll transmit, and that's really where it initially came in to be, and it's what it's used for in a lot of the industry. Is it is used to broadcast telemetry data, from a remote sensor somewhere, and then people picked up on it and said, "Hey, we could start actually communicating with this. We could send text messages through the Mestastic project." So that's kind of where that all came about.
Is so how effective is it? Actually, let me ask you Digger's question first, and then we'll go back to that. So Digger wanted to know, what is the effectiveness range if the grid is down?
Yeah. Well, the cool part is it is its own infrastructure, so that it is a grid down a mesh radios, whether it's Mestastic using LoRa or others that we can talk about here in a little bit, is as many of these as you have in a network is your network. Like I've used this example before, but like if you could imagine that, like, say you're walking around in a small city and every cell phone was able to, you didn't need the cell towers anymore. The cell phones would bounce the signals around. Now, it probably really wouldn't work in the voice world or video world, but it would work in like an SMS world where you're just sending short, small data packages through messaging apps. But so there's a lot of people set up now. It's because it's become so popular in a lot of areas. They're already like ham radio operators and they have antenna towers, or they'll find ham clubs in their area that do have like repeater towers, and they'll set up a solar node, which is just basically a plastic box with a small solar panel on it and one of these devices inside of it and a battery. And then that thing now acts as basically as a repeater in that area, and it's up in a high vantage point, over a city or the typical spots you'd find a repeater tower somewhere. Now all of a sudden you might have an easy 5 to 10 to 20. Now there's people that have gotten the record ranges, which they've obviously done a lot of work to get those ranges. Like hundreds. Well, it's always in kilometers. I think 254 kilometers is the current world record. But that was like from a mountaintop over water to like, somewhere else. But, to give an example, here in Albania, I have one I built that I'm on the 6th floor of an apartment building, and I have a balcony, and I have one out on the balcony, and I've picked up another node in Montenegro, which is the node is 83 kilometers from me. Now I can't communicate with them. It's too far. If I got a directional antenna like a Yagi or something, I might be able to make contact. But I've picked it up. So
there's a bunch there I want to unpack, but a couple thoughts that come to mind is, unfortunately, most ham dudes are getting older. I'd like to know what the average age of a ham guy is, but I know it's not young. And what I found in my area is that they can't even find guys that are able-bodied enough anymore to even go down and say modify or reset repeaters. They just don't have the guy. Nobody's climbing a tower. Most of them can't even drive at this point to get there to do it. But what I like about this is the tech guys, and I'm heavily generalizing here, but for the most part, tech guys are going to be in their 40s or younger, so still mobile. So you've got guys who are now have a vested interest in those repeater locations, and those repeater locations are by default going to be high up, and in a nice location. So you may have some new guys who are like, hey, maybe we want to upkeep this area a bit. And then the other thought I had here, again, most repeaters require some sort of generator to keep running because they do require a fair bit of power. Whereas this, once it's up there, just another thought, I've got 3 of those Wi-Fi solar cameras that run just off Wi-Fi and solar. The 2 of them have been outdoor for a year in Canada. I have a south facing, just a 4x4 solar panel. Never once have I had to top the power up. They just, if that's a camera, I can't imagine how little juice these drip.
Like before I left to come over here to Albania, I did a test on my solar node just to see, and I added 3 18650 batteries to the case because I had the room, and I was like, oh, let's see how long. I ran out of time, but I'd gone 30 days without any input, no
solar or anything.
There was still, if I remember right, I think there was still like 35% battery life or something, because you can look on the device and see the percentage, or on your phone through the application, you can see the percentage of battery power that's left. Now any sort of solar input would have, kept that system up and going. And that's what some of the guys, there's a couple different solar panels that are kind of the go-to in the industry. That there's like a 6-watt panel that a company called SoShine makes. It's because it's 5-volt out.
Right.
So you don't have to have any sort of step downs or anything like that to plug it right in. Because most of your devices your tested devices have USB-C ports and the, typical 5-volt in inputs. And then there's another one that's become pretty popular because it already has a mount on it that's sold on Amazon. It's meant for just what you're talking about, surveillance cameras. So it's literally what it's sold for. And there's a lot of people using those because it, like I said, it already has the mount that'll mount to a wall, and you can change the angle and stuff on it. So, but yeah, you could keep one of these running. They use very little power. Now, obviously the power, if you have a lot of traffic going through it, it's going to increase its power consumption, but you're not talking about a lot of power, especially if you dial in for a repeater setup. You don't have to have a GPS node on it or a module on it, which will save you power because you don't need to know exactly where your fixed node is because you know where it's at. But and then there's some other settings you can go into to like really save power on them.
So where does one get started with building a mesh network for themselves, and how does that kind of fit into your emergency comms plan?
Yeah. So I'll first touch on the comms plan, just real basic questions I tell people to ask themselves. Is the first thing they need to ask themselves is who do they want to talk to, right? Because you need to know that before you really start to build an effective plan. And then how far are they from you? Are they, over 30 miles? Are they less than 30 miles? Are you willing to get a license? And that includes even GRMS, like where you just pay for it, but, and then what's your budget, right? If you tell me your budget's, $100, well, it really limits what what you're going to be able to work with. Where Mestastic, I feel like you get started with is go to a reputable, company like Rockland. And if you're not a tinkerer, you're not a person that like wants to try to do any soldering or try to figure out how to put together a 3D printed case, even if you buy it from somebody else. You just, go on and get something like the T Echo, which is ready to go. Or radio. You might have, you don't have to update the firmware, but you might want to update the firmware. It's gotten a lot easier than it has been in the past. Messtastic's created if you go on their website, which is messtastic.org, they have a link for their flasher. So it's a web-based flasher. It has a lot of instructions and drop-down menus. It's gotten a lot more user-friendly. Or you buy something like the Rack Wireless, their, what do they call it now? I forgot the name of it. It's so new. It's like mesh something. But yeah, they've sold out of their pre-order of that. First batch. They're supposedly going to have a second batch available soon for pre-order. But and download the application and get your devices and start playing around. You're going to want to join probably either a Discord group. I have a Telegram group. There's also Meshtastic not Discord, Discourse that has a lot of Q&A. It's a kind of a more old school, little more forum based kind of, not quite forum, but just a little reminiscent of that style of website. And that's where you can usually find a lot of your answers to your questions. Like I said, like my group, there's a Q&A section, and there's a lot of people that hop on there and just start asking questions. Tends to be a little more on the more advanced questions, but there, no question is, no one's going to get beat up for asking a question over there.
So from there, then what? So, I should ask, how much does that little device, that one right there?
Well, prices have gone up. You're looking at about, because there's two different types of these, and I don't even know if they sell the original ones, or they have a new one that's called has a BME. It has that, what I was talking about earlier, it has the sensor in it for like humidity, temperature, so on and so forth. Those ones are around $65 ish. The Rack Wireless one that's coming out is, the pre-sale price was reduced. It was like 80 something. I think its retail price is going to be $99. I personal preference, Rack Wireless seems to be higher quality equipment. It make better boards than LilyGo. I mean, I have a lot of LilyGo, which is the other manufacturer, the other primary. And there's one called Heltech. I don't own any Heltech. Heltechs are the cheapest. They tend to be where a lot of people start because they can buy them right off of Amazon for like $35.
Okay.
But they're pretty bare bones. A lot of times they don't come with a battery. They don't have any. So you got to find the right battery, order the right battery. That's why where I tend to steer people towards like Rockland or buying direct from LilyGo, or because you can buy direct from them, or Rack Wireless, because you can screw up and order the wrong battery. Because Amazon, even though they're really good at recommending things to you, sometimes they might be like, oh, you want this battery, might be down below. People also bought this battery, that little thing. You might get the wrong battery. Really, it's going to be the right battery as far as power output, but the connector might not be the right connector. So, and then not say you can cut the connector and solder on the right connector, but is that something you want to do? So
I've been there. I'm fighting with an old fashioned light fixture right now that I've ordered parts for 3 times and it's not working. So I get it. Yeah. Yeah. So what, so let's just pick, some sort of, let's say you got a 5-acre property. Actually, no, let's say you got a 15-acre off-grid property in Tennessee, that's slightly wooded and on a bit of a hill. I don't know. There's somebody there. So what would I need to set up what would this, theoretical person need to set up a mesh network on a property like that?
For something like that, it really, one fixed node is what I tend to call them, or solar nodes, that would go up on a high point ideally, on some sort of pole, or building, where it's, over 10 feet off the ground. Higher would be better if able, but if you do have high ground, which I know based off your videos, there is some high ground there, but and then you would want individual radios, for each person that you wanted to communicate with. And then, of course, they'd have to have the application. The cool thing is once the application is set on someone's phone and they have the radio, as long as they don't even have to have it in their pocket. Say you're, working on a cabin or something, and it's sitting on a table, but you have your phone in your pocket. If you're within Bluetooth range, you're still going to get the messages. You could SMS someone back, and then you'd be all, basically set up and running. And then you could even, have spares if, you had a bunch of people coming out. And it does start to get at capacity, just because I'm sure some people might be considered this. So probably about the time you get around 30 plus, you're going to start having problems with the getting too busy. The Hamvention, which is a big ham like festival, they did a bunch of what's his name? Josh from Ham Radio Crash Course's YouTube channel. Yeah. He had a whole channel set up, and he did a video on it. Like he said, it got a capacity, but there was like well over 100 plus devices there. So
wow,
it just it basically crashed the network, is in essence. So it was just too much. And so I think they did have some luck of people switching to like a private channel and smaller groups. But then it's still because they use each other, even if they're, like we talked about earlier, even if they're not set to that channel, they'll still use each other to make a hop to another device. They still had some problems. So it does have limits. So.
And just so everybody knows, and to make sure I'm on the right page too, you could use an old disconnected cell phone, right? Like there is no need for, like because at our property in Tennessee, you almost don't have any cell service anyway. So that's not a concern, right?
Mm-hmm. No, it's not. You don't need, you can have, I have an old Samsung tablet I have it installed on, and I can't remember what year it is, but I haven't, because sometimes you get to a certain point where like things get old enough, and then the app store tells you that you don't have the, whatever, and you're like, really? It's kind of that force you to upgrade thing. But I haven't ran into that problem, and knowing, or I don't personally know, but the developers over at Mestastic would probably take that in consideration. And when they're working on this stuff and doing app updates and stuff, because a lot of people in the Mestastic world do that. They'll have, they have their primary phone, but maybe they have their last 3 old phones that, they're like, hey, cool, I have these and I have the app set up on them, and I can hand them out to friends or family, whoever. And we can, they can run around while we're camping, and, I can communicate with them or whatever. So
I like that. So is there anything else on the mesh end of things that you wanted to touch on that we hadn't covered?
So to help with the understanding of mesh, so because Mestastic has become so popular, there is a lot more there's a lot more to Mestastic or mesh radios than just Mestastic. Now the prices dramatically go up, and that's where a lot of people hit their threshold. And I get some people that get a little upset with me when I do videos about radios that cost $1,000, and I'm like, hey, if that's your, that's fine. I'm not telling you have to go buy these things,
right.
And but so there's a couple companies out, and I have some waiting for me when I get home, and then I'll be doing some testing on them. Beartooth is a company that's been around for a while. In fact, the founder of Beartooth actually worked with Simtech and people on his team worked with Simtech during the development of LoRa, the whole LoRa protocol and how to use it. Now, they had their first series of radios, their Mark 1s, or I don't know if they call them Mark 1s. Their newest one's called a Mark 2, but those were kind of sold as very similar to a LoRa or a Mesh-tastic device, but they had they're sold to kind of more like the sports outdoor market. They were waterproof and whatnot, and I think they did okay with that market, but they didn't do what they thought they would do. So then they moved more towards the military, law enforcement, professional agencies, search and rescue people, and emergency management, that type of thing, to see if they could find some customers in that space. And they developed a radio, the Mark II, which, like I said, a lot of people are like, it's the same as a Mesh-tastic device. Well, no, it's not. It uses completely different technology. It doesn't use LoRa. It does use the ISM band, but it goes all the way up to the 1 watt, and you can send short voice messages and like video, or not video, but like pictures. So you could take a picture of something with your phone through the app, and they have their own native app, and then there's also an application that a lot of people use called ATAC, which is Android. Well, I'm going to screw this up. I always forget. Yeah, it's Android something. Is it like awareness kit something? The A is awareness, but maybe it's Android tactical awareness toolkit or something like that. So through that application, so it has a lot more. It has a more bandwidth, so it can send more, but they're not cheap. Like a set of them is they're currently been running a pretty long 40% off sale because they're trying to get private market interest. So can get a set for around $1,200. So, but then you move up from there to like a company called Doodle Labs, which is pretty well known in the mesh communications world, especially on like the military side. And they have what they call a Mesh Rider series, which those are they're all pretty much the same tech, but they make like really small ones that are meant to like be installed on drones, that basically would provide you an airborne relay or airborne repeater setup, but they can also stream live feeds back to your phone. So
as in video?
Yeah.
No way. Okay.
Yeah, and those ones are also in the unlicensed side, but they are like $1,500 a radio, and that's just the radio. It doesn't include like a lot of the other components. They get dramatically more expensive. And then GoTenna, which I don't know if you've ever heard of GoTenna.
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
they're kind of their first versions. They've never, if I remember correctly, they've never run on LoRa. They were using the MERS frequencies actually, but they use a mesh technology. Their newest ones are called the Pro 2Xs or X2s. They require a business, like an FCC business license. But they offer a much more advanced capability. Same thing like video streaming, voice, a bunch of different stuff. So, and I think they're about $1,200 a radio. So there's a lot there that if you're looking for more technology or more capability than what Mesh-tastic can offer you, then there's quite a bit out there that is now being available. Just to give people a little bit of comparison, there's a military radio that and they're primarily only used in the soft community, the special operations community, because of the cost. Those radios are $20,000 a radio. And they basically have about the same features as like what I was telling you, that mesh writer from Doodle Labs. They have a little more capability, and of course they have the the bands and frequencies open to them that's only available to military and stuff like that. But yeah, like, so that's one, like, people are like, well, that's so expensive. I'm like, well, I mean, for one, I usually know if someone tells me that it's that really expensive, I'm like, well, for one, I know you're not a ham person because
You know the price.
because ham radio equipment is really expensive. Even if you're like, well, radios are, by the time you start buying cables and everything else in between, you can get a lot. I don't have that kind of money into, I don't have one of those. I mean, I've been in ham shacks that I guarantee you there's $50,000 in that ham shack. So including the tower outside, but so, and they probably don't see it that way because they spent money over the last 20, 30 years of their life, and it's been just a little bit at a time. So
when you mentioned the band, something stuck in my head. Was it how many, was it megahertz, 900 and some megahertz?
Yeah. So it's really high.
So that's really close to what the old cordless phones ran on, right?
Yes, absolutely. And there's some advantages to that. If you're concerned about things like location finding and stuff like that, there's, when you're hiding in the noise, so 950 megahertz, and then like here in Europe, it's 868 megahertz. Even if you dial up, if you're someone like myself that has an SDR dongle and you dial up those frequencies, you're going to see a lot of traffic. And then there's plugins you can get that will decode some traffic or some levels of traffic. Like it'll tell you Lexus car remote or Volkswagen car remote, like when someone hit the button. Now there's even higher levels of that to where, those people are using those like the Flipper Zero things where they're actually stealing the signals, but you can just see the signals on an SDR with the right plugin. And so when you think about that, if you're in a city and you're using a very low power device and you're not constantly broadcasting, you're pretty low signature. So it definitely makes you a little more obscure if you want to be more private, and then you throw encryption on top of that, and you definitely can protect your privacy a lot more. I wouldn't say 100% because I'm sure there's somebody come on here, I could hack that and whatever. I get it, but you can probably, but the 98% of us probably can't. So
I mean, the government, what was it? I think it was the Orlando nightclub shooter at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It was either when he died, it was his face ID or his thumb. I can't remember. And the government was able to hack that. I think it was some Israeli group or, so when you have infinite resources and, no limit to the money you can spend, sure, you can crack it. But our old buddy, Stephen Harris, he used to use the term security through obscurity.
Yeah.
And, for 99% of us, that's all we need, right? Yeah. You don't need the NSA level encryption for some of that.
No, and you don't. And quite simply, like a lot of people, it's they're probably their number one vulnerability is going to be their cell phone that they're using to interface with the, so maybe that is where, if that's something you're really worried about, you use a old phone, whatever. And another thing people tend to not do is when they set them up, they don't change the Bluetooth passcode and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things you can do to increase the privacy and while you're using them. But they said the mesh radio world is come to the private market as far as I'm concerned, from the military market, because the technology was obviously built and designed for the military, and then the private citizens, especially in the United States, really want everything that the military has. So
night vision,
eventually it makes it there. I mean, there's when people get into the night vision world, like I know some people that spend some major money on that stuff, and so that's why when I tell someone like, hey, this radio is $500, they're like, oh my God. And I'm like, what how much is the new AR-15 you bought, and the night vision goggles, and the body armor you bought, and the ballistic helmet you bought, and it's like they're like, I got a Baofeng. I'm like, you got a $25 radio, and you got a $2,000 rifle, and another $2,000 or $3,000 in other equipment. I'm like, okay, all right. Communications are not important. Don't worry about it.
So is there any other cool new gear out there that that has jumped out at you, and you're like, I was doing prep for tomorrow night's show earlier today, and I don't know if you've seen it, but Starlink is getting ready, I think within this year, to offer cell service.
Yeah, that is really cool. And I talk about in a lot of my stuff, like GRMS is one of the other things I recommend, because I tend to stay on the kind of unlicensed side, license free, because I know there's a lot of people in that space that just won't deal with, and GRMS is usually about as far as they'll go, where they have to navigate the FCC's website and buy a GRMS license, and it's $35 and it lasts for 10 years and works for your whole family. Well, now GRMS is offering, some of the new handheld radios are offering the ability to text and send your location sharing. Now Garmin had this feature on one of their, it was basically a radio and a GPS all in one, and they still do. But I think like their current version,
InReach, or is that?
Well,
is that
the InReach is a little different, but
okay.
Yeah, InReach is, but they had one that was, it was basically a two-way GRMS radio and a Garmin all in one. And I think their current version, one of those is like $600. Now the InReach is about, depending on which one you get, I think 400-ish. But that one's using satellites, which is, I wouldn't, if you're looking for a robust communications plan, it would probably be somewhere in my communications plan, me personally, because,
Not to cut you off, but I'm pretty sure that the iPhone has that built into it now. It does. Well.
And that if you have an iPhone, I did, and I don't remember the details. I did watch a guy basically doing a comparison between like InReach and one of the other popular satellite communicators, and then iPhone. And there were some things that he didn't like about the iPhone, but if you already have it,
right.
Why not, have that, is count that as, okay, well, I do have some satellite communications capability. So, which is very cool. And then having the GRMS radios that have the ability to share a location and send and it's an encrypted message too, from my understanding from the manufacturers. I don't own one. The only problem is each one of the manufacturers is coming up with their own proprietary protocol, so they don't intercommunicate. So if you're building the plan, it'd be kind of hard to build a communications plan around that unless you could get a whole group of people together and we're like, okay. And even in that case, I probably wouldn't buy, because they're obviously a lot more expensive per radio. I would think around $160 a radio, depending on the brand you get. To where maybe like one per group or one per household or whatever. So you have that capability. You don't need one per team member, or however you have your plan set up, so that you're saving yourself some money, but then you still have that capability of like sharing location and stuff. But it's not, from my understanding, it's not on the radio. It's on an application that you download onto your phone. So, so that kind of ties into that part of it, which it could be problematic, I'm sure, but I personally feel like if someone's going to build a plan, and they're especially on a budget, they could start off with some Mestastic, pick up some GRMS radios for fairly cheap, right? And have some decent local short range communications. With the GRMS radios now, because there's a lot more repeaters out there, if you're getting more and more of those GRMS radios that you're buying off the shelf, have the handhelds have the repeater capability built into them, and you will obviously need most of the repeaters require you to share your call sign with them to get access. They're because they're like private repeaters. So you would have to actually pay for the license, not say you have one. You'd actually have to pay for one. But you'd have pretty decent communications, and with access to repeaters, you could cover 30 to 50 miles, depending on, your locality, in grid up situations, obviously not grid down. So,
I talk about the cell phone a lot, and you can't get away from it. We all use it. We almost treat it like a pariah in prepping. Sometimes we're like, I can't use my phone because EMP almost all technology, if something like that happened, it's going to be neutered at that
you're going to
point.
have trouble.
Right. But and here's another thing. So I went to the hockey game the other night. I took just my phone and a little bit of cash hidden in my phone into the game, because I have my Apple Wallet now, which means my wallet gets to stay safely in my truck so that I'm not worried about losing it. Now, I know everybody can whatever you want, but I guess what I'm getting at is the Mesh-tastic is great in a grid down, but you could also use it. You could also supplement with it when the grid's working as well. So you can, because it's an app tied into your phone, you could then take whatever local information you're gathering and then send it out further, even, if the grid was still up, right? Yeah. And again, you've got Starlink, which is building cell service. Everybody realizes you've got the iPhone with satellite messaging capability. Really, the phone, whether it's the iPhone or the Android, is becoming the funnel that everything else goes through. And, whether it's good or bad, I don't know. I guess I'm just kind of talking, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I always encourage people that they should have, their cell phone should be in their communications plan, right? It should be a part of their PACE plan, because it is probably 99.9% of us, it is our primary method of communication, right? So so you should be planning to use it. And there's multiple, as you already mentioned, right? There's different ways to use one. If the cell service is not down, well, maybe for some reason the Wi-Fi is working. You could use a Wi-Fi application that uses Wi-Fi. Like Telegram or WhatsApp or Signal or any of the Messenger, Facebook Messenger, whatever it is that and it goes right back to like, who is it you want to talk to? Well, if you have Telegram on your phone and none of your family has Telegram on their phone, well, then what good is that for you? So maybe Messenger is, because everyone has Messenger on their phone. Yeah. Do we really love, Meta or Facebook or anybody? No, but use what you have. Right. And if that's what your family is on, because even if you get your wife and your kids all on the same application, the same messaging app, well, what is it if you want to talk to your mom who lives 2 cities over or something? So, you need to be on whatever application, or you guys need to have the same application. So, but have those capabilities. And then if you have a phone that has satellite capabilities, well, now you have another capability within that one communication device. Cell phones, despite what people think, cell phones are radios.
Right.
So yeah, we all have them, we all use them. Should we solely rely on them? No, I don't think we should, but obviously, but you learn how to utilize them. You got, Zillow, you have all kinds of different ways. I'll briefly just talk about, there's a radio out there, just in case somebody's seen it. It's called Rapid Radios. And they have all these commercials all over Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and everywhere else about, like, the sky is falling, the cell service is out, AT&T's out, they're taking advantage of the AT&T outage and but they're advertising. You remember Nextel, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's that technology. Now they've supposedly made advancements on it, but it's push to talk LTE. So it's using cell towers. Now they do have an advantage of the fact that they have the way how their licensing set up or whatever, they can use any cell tower. So they're not, if one service provider like AT&T is down, okay, there is some redundancy there in that category. But I think they're selling them for they're not cheap. And but they're advertising them kind of as like an off-grid solution when they're not. So, and I hope just nobody like goes out and was like, oh, because there was all these comments on some of their ads, which a lot of those are probably fake, but like, oh, these are great. I bought 4 for all my grandkids that are in college. I'm like, you got 4 grandkids in college? Wow. But like, why don't you just talk to them on the phone? I don't, because it's the same thing. But anyways, it's I just wanted to put that out there just as a PSA, because as long as if someone buys them, but they know what they're buying, hey, more power to you. But like, you could download Zillow onto your phone and it's the same thing. It's a push to talk like over LTE. So
that's crazy. I'll have to keep an eye out for that, because I don't know. As long as there's ever been comms, there's always been people trying to take advantage of folks.
Yeah. And it works in all the, survival circles. Oh, but off topic, but you'd mentioned the book Bunker.
Yes. Oh, yes.
I just finished it the other day. So speaking of people that take advantage of.
Oh, yes. That's actually the thoughts, because in there was a huge segment on Y2K.
Yeah.
And if you totally off topic, but if anybody ever wants to get down a rabbit hole, just type in like Y2K Expo footage from, on YouTube. Yeah. And there is some crazy, there's not a lot out there, but I need to do a 6-part series, because right now is 25 years from when we were getting ready for Y2K. Mm-hmm. This was 25 from 99, right? So it's, anyway, but it doesn't matter, whether it's Y2K or the Mayan calendar or whatever.
What was his, what do you call them? Doom merchants? I think it's the author's the term, doom merchants. I thought that was
I'm telling you, he's on my bucket list of guys to get on the show. I would love to pick his brain. He's been on Rogan, so it would be a good get.
Oh, yeah, that's good. That would be cool.
So I guess we've been an hour and 15 so far, which never takes any time with you and I when we're talking. But so in your notes that you sent me, and I didn't realize it, you've launched, I don't know how I didn't know this, but a new YouTube channel or another YouTube channel?
I did, which was, I weighed the decision for a while, and then I finally said, well, let's just do it. And because my channel has always been, or I tried to base it kind of, my Ravenwood Acres channel based on preparedness, prepping, that type of thing. I went down the homesteading, and even though I enjoyed doing the videos and I have them there for eternity, as far as I'm concerned, just the marketplace on YouTube to be competitive in the homesteading space, you very rarely see anybody that doesn't have a really high production value, meaning they've got cameras, they're doing it a bunch of cameras, they're doing it full time. Like, they're not part-time person like me, where I'm working a more than a 9-to-5, especially in the military. And then traveling and deploying and stuff like that. And then trying to maintain a homestead is really challenging. So, that's definitely not, and I started YouTube to reach people, right? So, and if you're not, as long as you're enjoying it, it's okay. But if you eventually you're gonna be like, oh, I'm not really reaching anybody. So, and when the Mestastic thing kind of blew up, it really, like, those took over my channel, like, as far as like my views, my viewers, and I was like, man, I bet you the messaging when people come to this channel to try to get people to be a long-term subscriber is a little confusing, Mm-hmm. So maybe I should create my own channel that's only about emergency communications. So I launched a channel called MCOM Solutions, which MCOM is abbreviation for emergency communications, and solutions being, based on the fact that I'm trying to provide people with options, like people that are out there that have questions, that want to learn more, and want to, break through some of those barriers to entry. And that's why a lot of times I do I'll talk about a radio that costs, $1,700 a radio or whatever, because, that might not be for the person that's complaining about it in the comments, but it might be for the person that's like, that's exactly what I'm looking for. So, that's the capabilities I'm looking for. So, and since I launched in December, pretty much like right before I came out here to Albania, which I was like, oh, this is probably not the best time because I don't have all my resources to to do a lot of like hands-on reviews and testing, because that's a lot of what I was doing with the Messtastic stuff, actual build videos and testing videos and those type things. So I was like, well, I'm gonna have to get creative, and I've done pretty well. I mean, I'm over 700 subscribers now, so I haven't quite hit that dang 1,000 threshold, but for YouTube world to actually be able to monetize anything. But yeah. So I've enjoyed it, and I think I can keep going with it because it's something that communication is something I'm passionate about, and there seems to be the desire for the information. So I'm going to keep at it until until I get bored or people stop watching my videos.
So what happened, is Ravenwood Acres, is that sticking around, or are you still going to do some there, or is it
I haven't 100% decided exactly how I'm going to handle that. I mean, because it's still bringing me in, it's still growing. I mean, I kind of flattened out. I was on pace to make 5,000 over their subscribers. And it was like, I was on pace. So I should have made it like a couple of months ago based off the predictions. And it's definitely slowed down because of the fact that I'm not posting. I've posted a little bit of content there, but not much. And so I haven't decided what exactly I'm going to do. And now eventually I'll be back home. Be done here in Europe, and I'll be back in the US. So I guess maybe we'll see what happens then too.
So is this just a 1-year thing for you for sure? Like, is that
it's
it
definitely 1 year commitment, and potentially up to 2. Okay. I could stay for 2 if I choose to do so.
Okay.
I'm still not sure if that's what I want to do or not. And so we'll see.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Jake, where do people follow up with you if they want to learn more from you and reach out to you?
Well, the 2 places on YouTube, at Ravenwood Acres, and then at Imcom Solutions. My website is theravenwoodacres.com. You're going to find Imcom Solutions stuff there too. I do own the domain name for Imcom Solutions, but
good man.
And I got it currently like getting redirected to, because I haven't decided whether or not it's worth the effort to build a whole nother website. So I probably have to get a little more buy-in before I go through that effort again. So you can find all that information there. Social media, same thing, whether it's Instagram, Facebook. I'm on Odyssey, and I think I'm still on MeWe. I haven't been over there a long time, but I'm on Rumble, although I'm having issues with Rumble.
Everybody is right now.
Yeah. And then, and so I'm on there on both names, Ravenwood Acres and Imcom Solutions. So you can check me out at all those locations. My Telegram group, I don't know if I sent you that link.
I don't know. I don't think I'm in it, so I'll need to join. But send me the link, and I'll
send you the link afterwards, because I did have to. I created a new link because I was getting a bunch of spammers. So if I sent you one, it's probably the old link. But yeah, that's a good place, especially for Messtastic communication type stuff. So that's about it.
Well, thanks, Jake. Man, every time you come on, man, we just geek out on. I mentioned, I don't know where I might have been on Instagram. I said we're going to geek out on technology tonight, so it'll be a lot of fun. But man, you are welcome back anytime. I love having you here, brother.
Well, it's enjoyable to have a great conversation with you, Tim, and hopefully again here, maybe 2025. I'm hoping is going to be my year of making it to SRF. 2024 was on my list, and then things changed. So 2025 is my goal to try to get to SRF. So that'd be kind of fun to see you there again in person. So
there's always a place for you at Delinquent's Gully. You're welcome to stay.
Oh yeah, and I definitely have to come by and see that. So all right,
perfect. Well, if you want to hang just in the background for a second, I'll close up and be right back with you.
All right, will do.
Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. I love talking to Jake. I mean, we get along like long lost friends, and he's just a solid dude. And if you're looking to, learn a bit more about it, the guy has the ability to turn something like Meshtastic and, mesh networks into something very interesting, and to show you the benefit and, the value of doing it. So, reach out to Jake, give him some support, guys. And as always, stay happy, stay healthy, and have a great week.